What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Vanguard monthly Q&A, one of our favorite times of the month. Towards the end of the month, we always do these magical Q&A sessions with our fans and our audience, taking some questions from our patrons and from the chat alike. If you guys aren't familiar, one of our patron benefits is that you guys get to ask us questions in these monthly Q&As via Patreon. So we'll definitely be asking those ones and prioritizing those questions, but no worries to people in the chat. Maybe those of you who aren't patrons will also be getting to your questions too, as many of them as possible at least. And of course, if anyone super chats, goes without saying that we'll answer those questions as well. But yeah, always a great time, always a really fun time. Really excited to get into everything. But how you doing, Zach?
Yeah, man, super perfect time of the month to do a fucking Q&A, right? If you are listening to the Vanguard right now, know that you are one of the diehards of American politics. You are infected with a disease that you cannot remove for even a week long for holiday period. Because for normal people, nobody is tuning the fuck into politics at all. The world has sort of entered a stalemate where everybody's like, let's just forget about this for a while. That's what happens every time around these holiday years, or the holiday time every year, rather. So, yeah, we're really rocking and rolling, ready to do a Q&A, ask some questions, and do some foreshadowing into what 2022 holds, which is actually only 2 days away, and that's kind of fucking crazy. But yeah, let's get rocking and rolling.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy that 2022 is pretty much the day after tomorrow. That's pretty wild to think about how fast this year went by. To me, it still kind of feels like 2020, if we're being honest. So yeah, here we are, about to be 2022. Crazy shit. But yeah, I'm excited to chat with you guys. Excited to answer some questions as always. And like I said, we do have our patron questions that have been asked to us that we'll be giving priority to. But we'll try to get to as many from the chat as well, and of course any super chat. So make sure to ask anything you want in the chat, and there's a very good chance we'll get to it. And like I said, super chats 100% will be answered. But without further ado, let's get into our first patron question for today. Let me pull this up. Just one moment. All right, here we go. That's the patron board. Here we go. Thank you, Robert Hand, so much for the question and for the support on Patreon. Robert Hand asks, if the right is about concentrating power at the top. No, it's all good. It's fine. But yeah, if the right is about concentrating power at the top, i.e. the corporate elite, and the left is about distributing power across the bottom, i.e. the working class, why do independent leftist media so often refer to liberals who never fail to join conservatives in concentrating power at the top as part of the left, i.e. center left, rather than part of the right, i.e. soft right, as opposed to the conservative hard right? Well, this is a good question, Robert. And political labels are kind of both a blessing and a curse, in my opinion. I certainly enjoy it as a political junkie and someone that's interested in politics. I think that it's really fun to parse out the differences between everyone when it comes to what you stand for politically in every single sense, and in what sense are you truly a leftist and all that shit. But I think a lot of people, including a lot of liberals, just use left when it comes to social issues, sometimes more than they're even thinking about economic issues. And whether or not that's fair or right thing to do, that's just how it is. So a lot of people, if they, for example, support LGBT rights, or if they consider themselves feminist, or consider themselves on the left side of social issues, they feel progressive in those sense, they'll still refer to themselves as part of the left, even if they're not a communist or a socialist or whatever. A lot of people don't have as much education about economic stuff as they do about those social theories, and a lot of that is very intentional. It's the real economic theory, leftist theory, is often hidden from people, and they have to seek it out on their own. Whereas the more culture stuff, the social stuff, not to downplay the importance of it, is more forefront in our society right now. It gets talked about a lot more. People are more likely to have an opinion on that than a theory of economics. So that would be my answer. And I think really the best thing to do is just to separate them. And when you're describing yourselves, and if you are left leaning when it comes to social issues, then say that. But if you're not when it comes to economic issues, then that should be specified too.
Yeah, I think that what this all really comes down to is that, even now, but for the longest time, there just was no economic left in this country. That's something that, especially the way that, people like us and on our show and in our audience, the way we, conceive of a economic left, that was completely absent from any kind of mainstream political discourse in a way that would make it accessible for people to have regular, water cooler discussions about it. And, that's sort of a sense. It just wasn't on the table, right? Economic leftism was neoliberalism, conservative economics were, even less, fiscal help than the gutted Bill Clinton policies, right? It was like a more anarcho-capitalist policy making decision. But of course, that always comes with the caveat that they'll give bailouts and slush funds and all that kind of stuff to, the people that are lining their pockets, the lobbyists, etc. Right. So I think that's the big problem with it. Is you're right, Gavin, that essentially left versus right. It's like, do you think abortion should be illegal? Do you think gay people should get married? And, do you think women belong in the kitchen? Like for the longest time, that was like the political compass. It's like, if I think these things, I'm going to watch one channel. And if I think that's the worst thing in the world on all those things, then I'm going to watch this channel. But they all settled on the fact that like capitalism was great. And, we needed big, strong companies and we have to worship our billionaires because they're our strongest innovators. These all things were never in question. So that's why people started doing that. And then at some point, it just becomes part of our language, right? To just defer things to, like the left or the liberal is MSNBC, CNN, whatever. The right is Fox News kind of rhetoric. And, of course, we always give the caveat that these are corporate politics, right? Corporate leftism or corporate liberalism or corporate, right-wingism. All right-wingism is corporate, but yeah, that's besides the point for this argument. But that would be my 2 cents on it. And you're right, that's generally problematic, but I think it's more problematic just because so many people don't understand that there is a left alternative to the economic policy offered by both of these main, two-party establishments.
Right, and that's exactly how it is by design, because they want people to just accept the status quo when it comes to our economic system and only be able to differentiate themselves based on culture, social issues. So, everyone just has to accept that we live under capitalism, but do you like trans people or do you hate them? These are the options here in America. And that's where we're stuck, unfortunately. But yeah, good question. Very interesting stuff. And thank you so much for our first super chat question. Tommy, really appreciate that $20 generous donation. Thank you so much. Should the left-wing independent media build an alliance or federate it as it is each for themselves? This is a question we've been asked quite a few times as far as building alliances, trying to get together more of a collaborative network of shows. And generally, I think it's a good idea. If you look at what the comrades over at FHL, or now formerly FHL, now Revolutionary Blackout Network, I think that the kind of alliance style, network that they've built has been really strong for, conveying their message and getting these, smaller voices into bigger roles, more listeners, etc. I think that's a great idea. So generally, I obviously I wouldn't say I'm against this at all. As for the Vanguard, Zach and I have had the opportunity at a few times to add people to our channel, or people trying to come onto the Vanguard to be an official part of it. And usually we like to just keep it the 2 of us, just because we're pretty I don't know what the right word is. We just want to focus on our opinions for the most part. But I'm definitely not opposed in any sense to there being a bigger lefty network. It's more of just an organizational thing for me. It's already a lot to produce a show just for the 2 of us, and when you start adding more people, it gets a lot more complicated. And there's egos at war, and you know how it goes when there's a lot of people. It's like herding cats, especially in the political spectrum. Everyone has a lot of different opinions. So just for personal organizational reasons, I think Zach and I kind of enjoy staying on our own little island. But in theory, I think this is an amazing idea. I absolutely think more alliances are necessary. I love seeing when this stuff does happen. And of course, that's why we have a pretty lengthy list of friends of the show that make appearances on the Vanguard all the time and whose perspectives we like to promote. So I think that's pretty much what you're asking. I hope that was a sufficient answer, but I'll pass the baton off to you, Zach.
Yeah, I think that this has the potential to be really dope, just like a lot of good ideas, right? But let's not pretend that this hasn't been tried before on a grand scale. And I'll just remind everybody of a collaborative, large scale progressive media on YouTube named the Young Turks Network, right? How many people that are primary voices, guys, in left-wing media can you trace back directly to the Young Turks? I'm talking about having their hands in any of those shows honeypots at all. So let's just fire off a list of some of the people that you might know the names of. Of course, we can start with the obvious. There's Jank and Anna who still run TYT, right? There's some other people on TYT. I wouldn't consider any of the remaining cast members particularly relevant in the discourse, though. The guy that does the damage report or whatever, I think he has his own following in a weird way. Then you have Jimmy Dore, right? Left TYT in a big fashion, but that was really where he cut his teeth. That was where he got his launch in the YouTube world. So you have him. Kyle Kalinske was a TYT affiliate for a very long time. Then you have Mike Figueredo was definitely, I think to this day might still be under the TYT banner. So that's you have Hassan
Dave Rubin, bro. Let's not forget Dave Rubin.
Well, I was talking about the left, but yeah. Dave Rubin 100% came from there. I would consider him more a right winger now, for sure. But yeah, then you have Mike Figueredo. You have Hassan Piker, Jank's nephew, who again has kind of transcended BreadTube world and just become one of the biggest Twitch streamers to non-game Twitch streamers that exists. So that's been done before, but they just lost the ability to keep it focused and truly about the cause. And then it's like, if somebody, obviously you have to be able to disagree with each other politely. That's another one of the reasons why Gavin and I like doing a show with each other, because like I'll never get pissed off that Gavin has an opinion that's different than mine. I'll just argue with him on the show and then we'll just go back to hanging out like friends. The other thing that, as Gavin was talking about, if somebody else were to join the show, Gavin and I have been friends since we were in like 5th grade. There's just going to be a natural power imbalance. Even if everybody has like 1/3 vote, which is the only way that we would do it, would be to just expand the like one person, one vote thing. You're naturally going to have two people that have worked together and known each other for over a decade. They're going to, so it's just that power imbalance. Like we want to be fair bosses if we're ever bosses, and we don't want to be bosses, so we're never going to hire anybody, that kind of thing. But if anybody else did it and, they were like, hey guys, do you want to do a sideshow where it's for this and only this? And we, of course, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We'll get involved. But until that day, like Gavin and I aren't paperwork people, like, so we're not the ones to do that. We barely can do our own paperwork. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, and shout out to the Revolutionary Blackout Network for actually pulling this off, because I know there is a lot of that, behind the scenes work that goes into it. It's not just as simple as everyone hopping on a Zoom call once a week. Like there is a lot of that behind the scenes, calculating and all that stuff that goes on. So mad respect to those who do it. Again, just not necessarily our style, but I still think, in general, I mean, we have a lot of alliances with a lot of different other left-wing independent media folks and commentators. And, we have our rotating cast of friends that we like to invite on, Kamali Rose and, RJ and JB and Nick. And I'm mostly naming people from the Revolutionary Blackout Network, but you get the point, all of our friends of the show. So, certainly in favor of alliance. But yeah, thank you so much for the question, Tommy. Really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude.
And then we also got a super chat. Thank you so much for the $4.99 Diablo. Do you think the religion of wokeness is a means of preventing class solidarity? Well, this is an interesting one because I think the word wokeness definitely gets overused a little bit. I don't think anyone could deny that at this point it's kind of just an amorphous, like catch-all term, mostly used by the right wing to just kind of scold the left whenever they have a, indefinable issue with a policy. That's woke. I don't like this because it's woke or whatever. So, as much as I have used that word in the past myself, at this point, I am kind of starting to get annoyed by it just because, again, it doesn't really mean anything anymore. But that being said, I'm never going to change my stance. And this is something that I truly believe, which is that the left does lean too much into certain virtue signaling, identity politic type talking points and rhetoric when they should be focusing a little bit more on broad economic issues which unite us all, at least when it comes to winning elections. When it comes to like specific issue oriented activism, of course you're going to have to lean into certain things if that's what you're organizing on behalf of. But when it comes to like the broad left coalition, the politicians that are trying to get into office and stuff like that, I do think that the identity politics and the religion of wokeness, as you call it, does turn people off, not because people are racist or sexist or anything, but just because people don't like really being virtue signaled at. And I think that's a problem that the left runs into a lot. And I've made this point a million times, not just when it comes to race or gender or sexuality or any of that stuff. Virtue signaling is annoying across the board. I'm sure everyone's met a vegan or vegetarian that loves to virtue signal about how, much better they are than you because they don't eat meat, or someone that is really into recycling and wants to virtue signal about how everything in their house is made out of recyclable products. That shit's annoying, especially to working class people, because they're like, what do you think, you're better than me? Like, I also recycle shit. Like, get over yourself. Good job. The same thing applies for a lot of these more identitarian issues. I feel like when lefties really just want to like beat their chest, stand up on the hilltop, and scream about how virtuous they are, that's just generally really annoying to people, especially normal working class people that don't spend all day thinking about theory and stuff like that. So, again, I don't want to fall into the right wing trap of just being like, oh, wokeness bad. Obviously, social issues and culture issues are extremely important, and I'm an advocate for them too. I consider myself a feminist. I consider myself an ally to the LGBT community, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't necessarily think I should be making like, my feminism like the forefront of my political branding if I was trying to, start a coalition capable of, actually taking power with the working class. But, I'll pass the baton off to you, Zach, because you might have something more to clarify or disagree with me altogether.
No, I agree with a lot of what you're saying too. And also, I just wanted to give a shout out to Diablo Neruda. I'm pretty sure that's a Pablo Neruda play on words. Pablo Neruda is a great poet. But anyway, was a great poet. But anyway, yeah, I think that this all comes back down to like the woke scold religion of wokeness versus understanding that we demand as socialists, as leftists, equality amongst all people. Right. And that is the unequivocal line. If you do not demand equality amongst all people, then you are not a leftist, then you are not, a true socialist. That is class solidarity amongst all people, right? Once you've clarified that, it's like nobody is getting thrown under the fucking bus. It's like we're not accepting any deals that say, okay, well, fuck all of these illegals, right? These undocumented people have to get the fuck out, but then everybody else is like taken care of. Like, we're gonna never, sell out any of our comrades, right? It's not like, the original New Deal where it was like, okay, this is really great for white people, but fuck all of our black comrades, right? That's never going to be, that's not socialism, right? That's not true solidarity for all people, of the working and lower classes to rise up, so that's definitely, and that's a skepticism that I know is very pervasive amongst a lot of, black socialists, black radicals. They will articulate this very valid fear of saying, why the fuck should I rely on the white working class when they have done nothing throughout history but, betray us, throw us in the mud, and do all those kinds of things, which is why people are skeptical about this shit, guys. And if you ever want to have a broad, multicultural working class solidarity group, we have to do something to assuage those fears, which is where taking these quote unquote woke things that actually do matter and putting them at the heart of our efforts, right? Defunding the police, right? Ending mass incarceration and ending, broken window policing in people's communities. Working to make sure that, the trans homicide rate goes down. That they're not getting the shit kicked out of them again by the police when they have to call the police for help if they dare do it, right? All these kinds of things. Those are all real problems that as a leftist, I care deeply about, and I would never compromise on in any fashion. But it's exactly what Gavin was saying, right? The vegan thing, that you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be the person that, like, when somebody's trying to, like, in good faith articulate something, that you just like clamp down on them, tell them that all the language that they used was wrong, that capitalism is racist, and that if they had that thought, then they're fucking, insufferable, like can't ever be spoken to again, fucking worthless, white devil, whatever the fuck, right? Like that's not going to get anywhere either. So you have to kind of play that balancing act, and I think that that's what's really important. It's really not that hard to play that balancing act. It's just, if it's a serious, real issue, you don't compromise on it. And if it's just like, some sort of weird, hypothetical unreality, you just say, hey man, like, I think you're off base here, but let's just move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you articulated that 100% perfectly. Did want to address this patron question real quick before we get to these next couple super chats. Let's take a look here. Jacob, thank you so much for the support on Patreon and the question. Jacob, he's asking, what are the best ways for an average person to combat climate change? Just stop using straws, bro. I don't know. Anyway, are there any particular organizations you would recommend getting involved with? What are the odds our civilization survives? Getting pretty heavy here, man. All right. What are the odds our civilization survives? I mean, obviously in the long run, yeah, zero. Literally at some point, the earth will explode and the sun will expand and all that shit. But even if we were to, we're not going to make it that far. Yeah, let's be honest. Anyway, the best ways for an average person to combat climate change. I mean, obviously, this is a smaller thing, so it's not going to stop climate change. But I always do say that supporting your more local businesses and especially your local farmers market type of things over massive industrial agriculture, which is contributing to the deforestation of the Amazon and the ecocide around the world. I mean, that's obviously something that I support. And even though if it doesn't end up actually changing the world, it's still worth doing. So I always advocate for that. I think that the large scale corporate global industrialization of agriculture, in particular animal agriculture, is one of the biggest and unspoken factors in climate change, particularly what we see in the Amazon with the deforestation continually happening to make room for more cattle grazing, which in turn emits a shit ton of methane emissions.
Methane.
So yeah. So not only is the deforestation happening, which is destroying the lungs of the earth, the Amazon rainforest, but it's also contributing to these methane emissions. So support your local farmer, support your local farmers market and local people like that if you can. Obviously not everyone has the means to. So that's one small thing that you can make yourself feel a little bit better by doing. Political organizations to recommend getting involved with. I know that Extinction Rebellion is more of a UK based one, but they do a lot of great work that I wish that groups like the Sunrise Movement here in America were to take some more inspiration from, because while there are good activists in Sunrise Movement that are doing good work, I feel that they lean a little bit too heavily on like the Democratic Party elites to get things done. Oh, Joe Biden gave us a pat on the head, so therefore he must have our best interest at heart. Yeah, right. Whereas I think that groups like Extinction Rebellion, and I'm sure there's a equivalent to that here that I'm not aware of, they're a little bit more militant, they're a little bit more intense. So I'm not telling you to become an eco-terrorist, but just kidding.
Yeah. If I was going to jump in and say, all I would say is like the problem with climate change and the reason why the outlook is just extremely grim. And there's actually an interesting piece by this guy named Jake Biddle in The Baffler, who talks about this in the context of Don't Look Up. One of the big problems with climate change is that there's not really one thing that we can do. It's a matter of, disassembling and undoing an entire, hundreds of years or 100 years worth of how we live and how we structure society and how we transport goods and every single thing about how we live. Which essentially it just means, not that this is Jake Biddle's point, this is mine again, it means that we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. So what is going to happen is we can either get lucky and figure out a way that we can innovate our way out of it, which is like, we have a better shot of winning the Powerball, every single one of us that's listening to this podcast. Or we could just love each other, have a really good time on the way out. Like Evan said, there are inconsequential things that you can do to make yourself feel good and give yourself some hopium as we ride out into this disaster. That is it's just inevitable, guys. Like, I don't like to lie to anybody on this podcast. This is how I feel about the issue. I understand other people feel differently and a lot of other people have hope. I'm down to participate in any of the actions. I'm down to, raise awareness. I'm down to fight. I'm not giving up, but I'm just telling you that, that we're in one of those situations, Sartre/Hedges. I don't fight fascism because I'm going to win. I fight fascism because it's fascist. That's what you're up against with climate change, guys. You have to fight the whole fucking oligarchy. Everything has to be redone. The people have to seize power. It's a class movement globally that has to occur. I don't know. I'm saying that's a tantamount, that's a lot of pressure to put on any kind of movement, any one individual. It's not your fault. We fucking fell into this shit. But really, what can one person do? I'm sorry. You can't fucking do anything.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. But like I said, out of the groups that are doing climate change activism, I think the more militant ones have the better idea, to be completely honest. So, props to those. Anyway, is there any scenario where you vote Republican? Thank you, Andrew Matthews, for the 199. I mean, literally the only instance in which I could see that happening was if there was just straight up a leftist person that was running as a Republican just because in his or her county or state or whatever, it's such a red area that there's no way to win as a Democrat. For example, early in our channel's history, we talked to a dude who was running here in Kansas, who was a far leftist socialist. But since there was no chance in hell he would ever win as a Democrat in the state of Kansas, he was running as a Republican, which was basically a suicide mission. I mean, obviously he didn't win. He, barely got probably more than 10 votes. But I mean, if he was the only one on the ballot and there was no one else, I guess I would.
Yeah,
vote
I guess
for
I'd
that.
vote for Aria DeMezzo if she was sheriff.
True. Yeah, Aria DeMezzo, libertarian sheriff candidate in New Hampshire that we interviewed also early on in the channel. She was running on the slogan "Fuck the police" for sheriff, and actually won the Republican nomination. A lot of the people in the county that she was running in, I think it was called Keene County in New Hampshire, they didn't even know who they were voting for. They just checked off the Republican ballot in their primary, and it turned out that they were accidentally voting for a libertarian cop hating trans woman. So that was pretty fucking hilarious, to be honest. And yeah, I also would have voted for Arya. She was like, yeah, first thing I'll do as sheriff is basically just disband the force or whatever. Anyway, that was great. Yeah. So, in very specific instances, sure, maybe. But thank you for the question. It's definitely interesting to think about, Andrew. Unfortunately, most Republican candidates, in my opinion, are not worth voting for at all. But much like Democrats, but just even worse. So thank you for that. We can move on to the next one. Thank you so much for the $9.99, John McKinney. Really appreciate that. Got a movie question. Always love these. My issue with remakes is that they're remaking movies that really aren't that old. Most of them are from the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. Why don't they remake movies from the 1930s and 60s instead? Well, I mean, I agree with you theoretically, although a lot of those movies from the 30s to 60s, the classics, I wouldn't necessarily want to see remade. Like I'm not itching to see like a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window or whatever. That sounds kind of bad. Or some other classic movie. I don't necessarily think that most remakes are very necessary in the first place. So there's that to be said. But the reason why most of them are from the 80s and 90s is because most people that are currently have the ability to spend money on box office tickets right now grew up in that time period. They have nostalgia for the 1980s and 1990s. So motion picture studios have realized that all they have to do is nicely, neatly package nostalgia, and people will gobble it up. They'll buy it and come out in droves. We just saw that happen with this new Spider-Man movie. I know a lot of people enjoyed it, but let's be honest, that basically was just nostalgia bait. It was like, remember Tobey Maguire from when you were younger and he was Spider-Man, and remember Andrew Garfield, and remember all this shit. That's basically what Hollywood has devolved to. And yeah, the reason why it's mostly from the 80s and 90s is because that's when most people that are currently going to the movies, that's when they grew up. That's what they have fond memories and nostalgia for. And that's just when a lot of the big IPs, came into existence. And in the 80s in particular, commercial blockbuster cinema really blew up in a big way, in a way that 1930s and to the 60s just they didn't have that kind of style of movies. So there's more IPs, more intellectual property and franchises to draw from that period of time. We have the Ghostbusters and all these classic brands that are very easy to just bring back and remind people of, and oh, look at this, it's what you remember, it's what you used to love, and people will gobble that up, they'll buy it. So that would be my answer, but thank you very much for the question. Very interesting, John.
Yeah, and look, it's not like these films don't ever happen, right? Guillermo del Toro just remade 1947's noir film, Nightmare Alley, right? And it completely bombed at the box office, which is another reason why you'll never see these get made again. It was decent, but it wasn't nearly as good as the original. And anybody that cares enough to know that it's a remake of the original from 1947 is going to be nitpicky as fuck, because they're all jackasses like me and Gavin who will scrutinize the shit out of the movie subconsciously, right? I always have to remind myself, like, a lot of people just watch movies and they're like, yeah, I hated a lot of it, but it was still pretty good. And I'm like, okay, like, that's just not how I watch fucking movies. So that's a big reason of why it is. And then the other thing Gavin touched on, hit the nail on the head. There was actually a decent piece in Jacobin about this not that long ago. It was about how after Star Wars and Close Encounters and all this shit, Indiana Jones, whatever, it just became, the 80s were dominated by action figure, toy models, that kind of cinema. That was blockbuster cinema. Everything had to have action figures. Everything, came with toy sets and, dominated the discourse. And, people who grew up in the 80s and early 90s, right now, those people are in their like late 40s and, late 50s, whatever that range period. So if you had kids later, you have your own kids that are all into this stuff, but more than likely you have your grandkids that are really small, all that kind of stuff. those are the people that are big ticket spenders, right? Those are the people that go to the box office now. The younger millennials, the Gen Zers, like we're too poor for them to give a fuck what we want at the box office. So that's why you're seeing people who who are like my parents' age getting everything that they want at the box office satisfied. Like if you were born in 1972, I'm sure you're really excited about the nostalgia porn that they shoved into the fucking Ghostbusters Afterlights, because it's the only glimmer of hope that you have in your depressing ass fucking life as a 45-year-old in America. I don't know what the fuck else to tell you, but anyway.
Yeah, it reminds people of a better, simpler time when they were younger, when the world wasn't, going to shit, essentially. But yeah, that pretty much does that. To move on to our next question from our patrons, would you like to read this one, Zach?
I know how to read. Let's see here. Oh, fuck. Here we go. I know why you asked me if I wanted to read, you jackass. No, I'm kidding. Robin Klinkner, thank you for taking the time to write out this sprawl for us. What do you think about this idea, which I call earn the vote? All right, let's see. What I propose is that multiple grassroots activist groups, Poor People's Campaign, Sunrise Movement, Black Lives Matter, Code Pink, etc., and even independent media outlets join together and draft a formal cordial letter to Joe Biden listing policies that he can do through executive order or even through Congress with a little effort that he must enact in the next 3 years, or else the groups and their members will not vote for him in the 2024 election. By doing so, they not only make it more widely known that the power he has to pass policies, but they also create/use their leverage, making demands and ultimatums in a reasonable way, telling him 3 years in advance. In the letter, they can also express politely the skepticism he has engendered by making clear promises on the campaign trail for which he has the power to pass, that he has subsequently not mustered any willpower to fulfill. Therefore, they can state enacting those policies and would be the only way to dispel the skepticism and feel that he has earned their vote in the future. And this coalition can nominate a stand-in candidate to vote in the case Joe Biden doesn't fulfill their demands, someone who is respected and is a supporter of the organizations in the group in the coalition, such as Nina Turner. I personally don't support either corporate party, nor am I under any illusions that Biden would actually follow through on the demands. I didn't come up with this idea out of naive, unfounded hope of changing the Democratic Party from the inside out. I came up with it as a way to mobilize forces and energy on the left to apply pressure and hopefully instead fear the establishment, which is the primary barometer of effective resistance. Would like to hear your thoughts about this. And yeah, everything you said there in a reasonable, fucking rational world would be exactly how the fuck you go about this. Unfortunately, we have a paid off geriatric bag of bones for a president. And, this is, the Code Pink, Sunrise Movement, Black Lives Matter. They kind of had a similar coalition to this, a similar meeting kind of before this. There was a progressives chat with Joe Biden, and they came up with a bunch of things that they were going to use to hold him to account. It didn't get a lot of media coverage, obviously, because they were trying to plan on backtracking it. But for people who covered this back, or who were with us on the Vanguard back this, we covered it. And basically, it had really simple things like passing the $15 an hour, a staple of his campaign promises. $10,000 off of our student loans. Working to change the police force is what I think that they settled on, because he would never say defunding the police, but it was like police accountability and those kinds of things, etc. Right? And you know what he did? He just fucking ignored all of that shit. He even ignored the Build Back Better shit that's failing in front of him. So unfortunately, the way that our system is set up, even if you had take the biggest media, biggest indie media that we have right now, people like Breaking Points, they're pointing this out every single day. Anybody that watches Breaking Points, or anybody that watches, Jimmy Dore show or Bosch, even for the most part, or probably even Hassan Piker. I don't watch a lot of these people, but for the most part, I know that they're all pointing this out, saying Joe Biden could do a lot more. He has the ability to do X, Y, and Z. Even AOC is out here tweeting about how he has the authority. The problem is that he doesn't care, and he knows that nobody with power will actually put pressure on him, right? Because he's already gotten the Bernie to say that he's his good friend. When Zephyr Teachow, who was one of the biggest names from the Bernie Sanders campaign, at least as far as credibility on the left goes, she's running for AG of New York City, that kind of thing. Bernie condemned her, said that Joe Biden's not corrupt, said that, he's going to do all this blah, blah, blah. So, everybody ran cover for him. So I just, a lot of people have tried this, and if it's something that you're passionate about, Kevin, and I would never tell you not to go for it. And and try and make it happen. And if you ever wanted a clip of us saying, these motherfuckers need to earn our vote, we're not fucking doing it anymore, we would happily send it to you, to put something together. And we fucking appreciate, that you're a Gen Xer that was immersed in the golden age of hip hop and that you love Outkast. Yeah, Outkast is one of my favorite groups, period, across all genres. But anyway, Gavin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for the question, Robin. I really appreciate that. And it's a really good question. I think it's a great idea. And like Zach said, would definitely never like try to dissuade someone or dissuade you from, trying to organize and mobilize on behalf of this earn the vote idea. I certainly think it's a good one. That being said, yeah, I have to agree with Zach that the slightly more cynical side to me agrees that unfortunately, I mean, Joe Biden already made a bunch of promises on the campaign trail that he's already not fulfilling. I don't know how he could possibly be convinced to pursue these new set of promises now that he already is in power and our leverage is gone. And we don't know if he's going to run in 2024 anyway. And even if he does run in 2024, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Democrats and Biden have made the calculation that they don't really need our votes or want our votes. They'd rather go for like the George Bush Republicans that never Trumper Republicans. They want to expand their coalition in that direction, not in a leftward sense. They want to make the Democratic Party more like the Republican Party light, and they'd rather not have to, contend with constituents like us, which is why I'm not particularly, ever or never really that convinced to vote for Democrats anyway, unless they're like Bernie Sanders style ones. And he's not even a Democrat. He's an independent. So that's the cynic in me. Again, I think it's a great idea. I think you should absolutely try it. I would love if it does actually materialize. Of course, we would support it. Of course, we would talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, Joe Biden he doesn't give a shit, man. He really doesn't. And he's not even, pretending to fight for the promises that he actually made on the campaign trail, like a public option. So, it's a little bit depressing in that sense. And thank you so much, Elizabeth, too, for the $20 super sticker. Really appreciate that, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. And it looks like she also followed up with a chat saying, hey guys, greeting from the Rockies and New Year's. Thank you, money. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate that. It really helps our channel. Very cool about the compliment you got from Glenn Greenwald. Keep up the class analysis. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for the comment and we were also really humbled to receive that compliment from Glenn Greenwald. As I always say, I don't necessarily agree with the man on everything, but really do respect the work that Glenn has done over the years, his journalism, some of the most brilliant national security reporting, and as well as his reporting on Lula in Brazil. I mean, just a huge influence to me, a huge inspiration in that sense, even if we don't, always agree on everything. That's always how it's going to be. But yeah, really also, that was a big thing for us and really just glad to have his support in general. So yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, totally.
Yeah, Gavin and I have pissed off like literally every single person that we've ever had on our show by like articulating a disagreement that we've had or like being like, oh, don't see it that way. This is our show. We're going to talk about our fucking opinions on here. And then we always hear about it, except Glenn would never do that. That's one of the things that I respect so much about him is like Glenn's like, we disagree. Okay, fine. Let's have another chat sometime about some other shit. Maybe we'll talk about some shit we do agree on. Maybe we'll talk about some of our disagreements. And that's all you can fucking ask for from somebody. And also, of course, it's deeply flattering that somebody that I've admired for long before I ever thought I would be podcasting on YouTube, is thinks that we're funny and smart. Obviously, that's incredibly cool. So thank you, Elizabeth, for your donation. That's also humbling, and we're grateful for that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Really appreciate that. Just to answer one regular question, you don't have to pay to get your question answered. Thank you, Austin. Y'all watch the new live action Cowboy Bebop. I have not. I haven't actually even seen the original, although I know it has a big fan base. And I've heard the new Netflix one is not very good, so I haven't been particularly compelled to check it out. But thanks for the question, Austin. If you enjoyed it, make sure to let us know in the chat. But yeah, you haven't watched it either, have you, Zach?
I fucking love Cowboy. No, I don't know anything about anime. One time I got really fucked up at this one dude's house and we watched Neon Genesis Evangelion for felt like 3.5 hours. And that's my one exposure to what people say is real anime. Everything else I tell people about, it's like, I mean, I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender when I was a kid, but anyway, no, we don't have to get into that. But yes, thank you for commenting, Austin. And if you liked the show, let us know, and maybe we'll give our second foray into anime watching. I have a lot of free time that I'd be down to kill. Anyway, I did also want to shout out Wesley Hairston really quickly, because this is a question that we get a lot also, and it's one that I just feel kind of strongly about, and the answer is no. It's kind of, I always bring it back to this because this is the only thing that sticks out in my mind every time. But it's kind of like blaming violence on TV and video games is like why we have problems in the real world. Like the one, we have problems on the left because other people keep putting up cockamamie bullshit when they should be standing in solidarity, because they should be holding people accountable and they're not. I'm not gonna say here and be like, I'm sorry, I dragged a bunch of people because they didn't support force the vote, which was our one opportunity to actually use some leverage on the left. Like I'm not sorry about that. I'm not gonna walk that back. That was the correct decision. I don't give a good goddamn what you think about Jimmy Dore, right? Like that was the correct move. And that was what the whole beef was about. And that's from the whole side of the left that's like, these people are always castigating us and being mean to us. It's like, okay, well, in that example, they weren't. And also, I just think that if your movement can't make it through like a couple of people articulating their opinions on the fucking internet, who literally nobody's. Gavin and I are literally just two motherfuckers that decided to do this and start talking. If you can't overcome that as a movement, you're never going to succeed anyway. So the fact that anybody tries to hold this up as like the TMC guard is holding our movement back, it's just like, your movement, it was never going to succeed if we're the fuckers that are holding it down. I promise.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's a classic example, but I mean, look at the Republican primary in 2016, one of the messiest, ugliest, so much infighting, mudslinging, name calling, etc. It was so fucking ugly. And the Republican Party came out of that shit stronger than ever, united behind Donald Trump, who of course went on to win an unwinnable election. So, that right there is proof that ugly infighting doesn't necessarily actually distract from the real goals. In fact, sometimes it strengthens a movement behind someone or something. And obviously, in the case of the Republican primary, Donald Trump was not a good end result of that for anybody. But it's just an example of how sometimes ugly infighting and all that stuff doesn't necessarily hurt a movement. It can actually strengthen it. And in instances like this, I don't think there's anything wrong with having an aggressive debate when it comes to these very important issues. I think it's actually quite helpful to really hash out our disagreements. And I mean, YouTube is basically made for drama. So if you're going to be on YouTube consuming your content, then you can expect to see some, dramatic shit, some juicy stuff. If that's not your style, then, you can watch Democracy Now! Or whatever, and that's fine too. But for those people that do enjoy the more lively debate, like myself, I think this is the perfect space to do that, to hash that kind of thing out. And that's why we do it that way, because it's fun and because it's entertaining and because it makes people, perk up and pay attention when they might otherwise just, glaze over and look away. It's not very sexy to title a video talking about healthcare. No one's going to click on that video, unfortunately. What is a little bit more sexy, what is going to get more people talking, is Sam Cedar versus Jimmy Dore clash on subject of force the vote. We're still having a substantive conversation about healthcare, about strategy, about how to get there. But it's kind of disguised in a more, clickable format. It's like putting a pill in a brownie to make your dog eat it or whatever, although that might kill your dog.
How do you know Gavin has cats, man? I'm just saying. This next question from John McKinney, though, is the perfect question for Gavin.
Thank you so much for the $9.99, John McKinney. Why hasn't Catcher in the Rye been made into a movie? It has a lot of potential. Hypothetically, if it were made into a movie, should it be rated PG-13 or R? Well, hypothetically, it would absolutely have to be rated R, 100%. And this actually is a perfect question because Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger is and has always been my favorite novel. It continues to be, even as I have, grown a little bit and matured. And no, I'm not this fucking school shooter or whatever. But I know a lot of fucking famous, like the guy that killed John Lennon was a big fan or whatever. So no, I'm not one of those people. But the reason it hasn't been made into a movie is because J.D. Salinger, the author of the book, made it very explicit that he never wanted that to happen. He was not a big fan of Hollywood, which is, of course, reflected in the character of Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye. And he just generally didn't think it would translate well into a film, at least a mainstream kind of movie. And I happen to totally agree with that, mostly because Catcher in the Rye is all about the interior monologue. It's all about the stream of conscious narration from Holden Caulfield. And usually movies that try to adapt books like that don't succeed because you can't have a movie that's narrated throughout the entire movie. That just doesn't work. You can't have just a constant narration going on in the background of a movie. That just starts to feel weird and cheesy after like 10 seconds. So, that's why, it could technically be done. But again, the real meat of Catcher in the Rye, the real point of it is, that interior monologue, that stream of consciousness of Holden Caulfield's thoughts. And there's no way to film that. There just isn't a way to transpose that into the cinematic format. So what you would end up with is just a movie about a dude wandering around New York City for 3 days, and it wouldn't have the same power, or it wouldn't, have that same sense of personality. You wouldn't really feel like you're in the mind, in the shoes of Holden, which is again what makes the book so powerful and memorable, because it's such a unique perspective. So that's why I would say J.D. Salinger was dead set against this happening, although many people at the time tried to make it happen. But that's why, and I think he was absolutely right. Even though it's my favorite book, I personally probably would not want to see a film made of it unless it was like really done interestingly and in an unexpected way. But yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. It's a great book, but yes, Salinger was prescient, and his own hatred of Hollywood also probably played a big role in why he didn't ever want it to be made into a film. So it never will be. But yeah, it would be a hard R movie just because of the internal dialogue and all that kind of stuff. They would make it too cheap and cheesy if it was PG-13.
Yeah, I think there's at least quite a few F-bombs in it. So I think a movie can only have like 2 F-bombs, maybe just 1 before it becomes R. So that alone, if they were to faithfully adapt it, it would be an R-rated picture. But anyway, to move on, we have another question from DJ Elf7. Don't let Jimmy Dore silence the voice of real activists for a small set of approved voices. Yeah, I agree. I do agree that sometimes Jimmy Dore, when people disagree with him, including ourselves, he kind of lashes out. Maybe, doesn't really give them a chance to, explain where they disagree. He just kind of pushes them aside and doesn't want to hear it. I think that's certainly fair to say. The man's definitely a little bit narcissistic in that sense. I think that's just the reality of the situation. And that's something we've experienced. But, so in that sense, I agree. Sometimes there are real activists that, for example, in the DSA or something like that, that aren't corrupt. They're not just trying to sheep herd people into the Democratic Party, but they get kind of branded as that anyway by people, sometimes including Jimmy Dore. But that being said, I mean, Jimmy Dore's just a commentator. He has every right to express his opinion. I don't really necessarily think it's that big of a deal. But what's your opinion, Zach?
Yeah, that's kind of exactly how I feel. It's like, whatever your criticisms of the guy, again, it's just like what we said. We come in here, we talk shit. We don't, if your movement can't sustain itself beyond that, we got to change the movement. You know what I mean? So that's the way it is. So yeah. But anyway, Jam, thank you everybody for all of the super chats. We are really fucking appreciating it. I promise you. It really helps us, keep the show going, keep things going. I'm saying that a lot, but we really appreciate it. It's not just us bullshitting you. Is it just me, but Anna Kasparian and or Ben Dixon both come across as a snob? Is that just me? Probably just like a personality tick that you guys don't like them. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time watching Anna Kasparian or Ben Dixon. I know that I have policy disagreements with these people, but I mean, I don't have like any like ad hominem like massive issues with them unless I'm trying to roast Anna Kasparian for. No, she does actually. She had this one really super elitist rant about like she was super anti-homeless in LA, which was bullshit. So that was kind of snobby, but I don't know. Outside of that, I think it's just probably more of like I don't love that style of delivery. I like a more like laid back, sequacious kind of diatribing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, obviously I'm not a huge fan of Anna or Ben, especially Ben Dixon. I think has just had some really dog shit takes. So yeah, certainly they do come across as quite snobby. But they both have said correct things too, not to just totally take a shit. But yeah, I do agree with that, John. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Adam, also for the $2. What do you like about KC? I'm from KCK. Well, thank you so much for the super chat, and that's dope to hear that you're just pretty close to us. We're in Kansas City, Missouri. Adam is in Kansas City, Kansas. If anyone's not familiar what that terminology means, there's a Kansas City, Missouri, and a Kansas City, Kansas, basically right next to each other. Of course, one's in Missouri, one's in Kansas, right on the state line. We're in the Missouri side. Adam's on the Kansas side. What do I like about KC? I like that there's not a fuck ton of people in Kansas City. Even, smaller cities like Denver or whatever, way too fucking crowded for me. Kansas City, perfect amount of people, in my opinion. You still get the feeling of being in a big city, but you can go, get something to eat or go get coffee without having to see like a zoo's worth of human beings. That's something that I'm really not a big fan of when it comes to a bigger city like LA, even Chicago. Like I said, Denver. It's just a lot of fucking people, man. And I don't like waiting in line. I don't like not being able to find a place to park when I go, out to eat. That kind of shit just pisses me off. So I like Kansas City because it's a little bit quieter. It's a little bit less populated. And also I just, grew up here, obviously. It's where my family's from for the most part. It just feels like home to me. And in particular, the West Bottoms, where Zach and I live, is certainly my favorite area of Kansas City, and somewhere that I get a lot of creative inspiration from. So I like to, hang out here. I like to just marinate in the environment of the West Bottoms, which is kind of the old industrial neighborhood of Kansas City. So yeah, that would be my answer. I do really love Kansas City, though. I'm not gonna lie. It's I wouldn't really necessarily want to live anywhere else, to be honest.
Yeah, also rent is remarkably cheaper here than anywhere else. Like my girlfriend is currently home visiting her family in Los Angeles. We were talking. Her family actually lives out in the San Fernando Valley, where it's supposedly cheaper. Once was cheaper to live in than Los Angeles, and they built up this huge apartment complex. It looks like all the other fucking new apartment complexes everywhere in America, wherever you go. Gavin and I've had the good bit of privilege of driving around the United States and traveling a bit, and everywhere looks exactly the fucking same with those disgusting container 3D printed looking apartment complexes that are god awful and disgusting. So we love Kansas City because it has fewer of those than everywhere else. But also, when you live in Kansas City, you don't have to pay like $2,800 for a 400 square foot studio or something stupid, which I really love. And yeah, love KCK too. KCK gets shit on because the cops there are even worse than the cops in KCMO, unfortunately. They're real fucking fascists everywhere, but especially in KCK, Jesus fucking Christ, don't ever get pulled over there. But yeah, we can throw a rock and hit KCK from where we're recording right now. We're nearby the Strawberry Hill neighborhood, Adam. I don't know if you're around there. Love it though. Lots of good places to eat. Lots of old bars. Lots of old like churches and cathedrals. A really interesting kind of part of town. A lot of history there, so a lot of love there, and also some of the best tacos you can fucking get anywhere in the Midwest, dare I say, are in KCK. That like San Antonio meat market place that sells the tacos in the back are like just fucking insanely good. So anyway, thanks for the super chat, Adam. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I totally agree. KCK is underrated for sure. There's a lot of great stuff in KCK, and I agree that it just kind of has that old school vibe in certain parts that I like to drive through and just kind of check out the vibe. So for certain, and thank you for the super chat and the question, our Casey comrade. To move on to, let's get another patron question done before we get into these other super chats. But yeah, like Zach said, just a huge sincere shout out to everyone that's super chatting today. That really does help our show. Let's move on to this though. Hammock Lady is wondering about Don't Look Up. I mean, we were just talking about. So thank you for the question and the support, Hammock Lady. Always appreciate hearing from you. I feel as if Don't Look Up could be setting a new precedent for leftist representation, and I'd love to see more creative endeavors of this sort across different platforms. I've thought a lot about how the solutions to our most pressing problems could get a similar treatment. How about a novel? How about a novel about a futuristic society living with voting rights, proportional representation, UBI, free college, universal healthcare, and by an author with some clout? I'm looking at you, Margaret Atwood. She's written a few dystopian novels. How about one that's utopian? Yeah, the whole novel is just everyone's totally fine. There's no issues. There's no problems. Everyone's just like, I'm doing great. Just kidding. But no, I certainly see what you're saying. And, we've long said on this show, as big fans of movies and art in general, that there's no reason to discount the power and potential in artistic expression when it comes to changing minds, when it comes to starting a conversation. This stuff is important. And, sure, it is just a movie, but it is the number one film on Netflix right now in countries across the world. That's not nothing. It's not everything, but it's not nothing either. That does mean that, all those people now are thinking about climate change, and they're thinking about our non-response to climate change, more importantly. And they're thinking about how can we, maybe get the ball rolling and all that stuff. It raises awareness. So yeah, I'm not going to say that Don't Look Up is going to, solve the climate crisis or whatever. Obviously not, but it's definitely not nothing either. And I think that absolutely, it is a big, first for a lefty journalist like David Sirota to have written a movie this big, produced a movie this big, and have his message out there in that kind of way. So yeah, I think that's super important. And luckily, Don't Look Up I found to be a very potent metaphor. I think it absolutely speaks to our media's inaction and our non-response as a government and a globe to this crisis. And I think it's important that more people hear that message and are reminded of it, because our media is not doing those things. So absolutely, Hammock Lady, thank you for the question, and I agree with your sentiment.
Yeah, 100%. And just to piggyback on there, you said you're looking at Margaret Atwood. We're looking at you, Hammock Lady. Why don't you create your own art? You don't need Margaret Atwood. You have the idea. You get to hunting and pecking on your keyboard. If you don't know how to type that good, you'll learn, and you can get to cranking it out. It's not much more to it than that. But yeah, did want to get to a few of these super chats as well before they disappear from us. Das Bos Fleisch, regular in the chat. How you doing, man? Or person, we don't know anything about your gender based on your photograph or your name. Colonize Mars, just declared independence. You are founding fathers. First thoughts on the Constitution and implementing lessons from the past. Go. Lessons from the past would be that I don't think we go the Constitution route necessarily. I think we go the anarchist route, and we just kind of vote on everything, and we just live freely, and we have minimal oversights. But our common ethic is like, to each according to their need, from each according to their ability, that kind of shit. I think that's the way to go. But what do you think, Gavin?
Yeah, I mean, the one, if we were going to settle on Mars, I would say that to avoid some of the issues we've had here on Earth, that we'd have to, prevent some of the hyper capitalist exploitation and extraction, which has, led to the climate crisis. We can't just destroy every fucking planet if we're going to start colonizing new ones. So, if we were going to have a constitution, I would make sure it was a pretty, lefty, socialist, communist kind of constitution that make sure that the hands in the power of the people and not in the corporate oligarchy. But I mean, that's just pretty broad, stuff. But yeah, that's a tough question, man. I'm definitely no colonizer. I don't really know where to start as far as colonization of different planets goes.
Yep. Step one: do not put ourselves in charge. We will be getting high on the new planet and letting everybody else govern themselves, because we're going to be starting a new podcast called Life on Mars, and there's going to be no copyright laws for David Bowie's music, and we're going to get really into it.
I'm sure we'd be the only one to think of that. Did want to answer this question too from George Murphy. Big fans of you guys, and also Vosh. Well, George, you're probably the only one that can say that.
No, except for my little brother, who always is like, "Why do you guys beef with Vosh? Vosh is smart."
What are the aspects of Vosh you don't like? Love from the UK. Well, thank you so much, George, for the question. And really appreciate the super chat as well, sir. I'm not gonna lie, I watch Vosh sometimes. I think he's a good debater. I think he's an entertaining commentator, personality, whatever. That being said, I definitely do have my fair share of disagreements with him. I think when it comes to foreign policy, sometimes he's pretty off base. He likes to frame anti-imperialist ideology, like what we promote on our show, is just like a simplistic worldview of foreign policy that basically is just like US bad, as if that's the entire crux of the anti-imperialist philosophy, which I think is ridiculous. We are American citizens. Of course, we're going to be, most intent on critiquing our country, which our taxpayer money goes to fund their military adventurism. So I think that that's why, a lot of anti-imperialists in America focus so much on America. And it's stupid that Vosh doesn't realize that, and that he just reduces the philosophy down to America bad, China good, or whatever, when obviously it's more nuanced than that. We don't think fucking China is, a utopia either. But we're in America, and America happens to be the number one aggressor when it comes to militarism, when it comes to imperialism. So of course, that's going to be the focus of our criticism and content. And I think, again, it's pretty silly that he doesn't reckon with that and realize that, and he instead decides to smear people like us as tankies and shit like that, even though we're not even, as tanky-ish as a lot of people are. But that would probably be the main crux of my issue with Vosh. But yeah, other than that, I mean, he makes for a good, villain for the show, just because he has so many, intense, obnoxious kind of opinions and stuff. But I don't really give a shit. I mean, he has lots of good opinions too.
Yeah, and he also is like one of those champion flip floppers, bro. I never said that. Yeah, you did say that, bro. Like the crystal ball thing is the obvious example. Once he wanted to nuzzle up with Crystal and Kyle and friends, he immediately pretended that he didn't viciously smear Crystal Ball for like implying, or I think he actually outright said that she like stole her own campaign donations and like did all kinds of fucking crazy shit like that. I mean, he was viciously coming after out of sheer jealousy because of how well Rising was doing on the Hill and all kinds of stuff. It was very obvious. But then he just went and was like, oh, actually, all of my criticisms are really about Sagar. And I'm like, you little fucking pussy. Fuck you, man. But whatever. That is what it is. That's kind of how I feel about Vosh. It's like, I don't know why you didn't just come out and like he's filleted so many people right to their fucking faces. I was like, why did you not just do that right then? If you're gonna have that, like, I'm a debate me, bro. I'll fucking savage anybody. Exterior, like, why not go for it? And that was just so obviously a growth calculation that he was making, which is my least favorite fucking thing. I hate when you can tell that people are just acting a certain way because it's a growth calculation for their channel. And if you want to look at how the Vanguard's grown over the last 6 months, you can say we definitely don't make growth calculations here.
Yeah, it also kind of annoyed me before he had Crystal and Kyle on him. He went after Kyle for the dumbest reason possible. He was like, you don't talk enough about Tucker Carlson or whatever. And Kyle was like, literally, I have more videos about Tucker Carlson than you do. That was stupid and clearly just trying to bait him into a discussion, which again, he didn't even end up really debating. He just kind of politely sat there and tried to extract as many subscribers from their base as possible. Anyway, that's kind of his modus operandi. Again, it's not the end of the world or whatever. I probably have about as many disagreements as I do with just about any other commentator at this point, but it is what it is. Thank you for the question, George. John McKinney, another question. Thank you so much for the donations today. Really appreciate that, man. What's your favorite Dracula? Mine is a tie between Gary Oldman and Christopher Lee back when vampires were badass. You know what? That's actually pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I love the 90s Francis Ford Coppola Dracula with Gary Oldman. And I also love the Hammer horror Dracula with Christopher Lee, all of them. So, it's tough. Generally, I do prefer the Hammer era of horror just because it was so, they put so much attention into the sets and just the visual nature of the films were so impressive to me. All practical effects, of course. And, the same could be said with the Francis Ford Coppola one. The only issue I had with the Francis Ford Coppola one is that ridiculous fucking hairdo that Dracula has. It looks so stupid, man. It looks like he's wearing like a beehive on his head or something. It kind of is distracting, but in the scenes where that's
looks like
not
your mom when she's gotten out of the shower and she has her hair wrapped up in a towel.
I thought you were just gonna say it looks like your mom at first. Wow. But yeah, no, I totally agree with your answer, John McKinney, and that's a small complaint. I still really like the 90s Dracula. It's an excellent film. But yeah, there's not a ton of great, vampire movies. I'm trying to think of any like more recent ones. I can't think of one. I know that the director of The Invitation and Jennifer's Body is apparently working on a new Dracula film, which is super exciting to
Love
me.
The Invitation.
Yeah, me too. I love Jennifer's Body too.
Never saw Jennifer's Body.
I would highly recommend it. But yeah, so hopefully we get some more, badass vampire action soon. But I can't disagree with your takes on this at all, John.
Yeah, I've actually never seen the Hammer horror movies. I know you were trying to get me to watch them over Halloween, and I didn't because we watched like 70 million other Halloween movies. But I know you did watch the Christopher Lee ones too. So I'll have to put them on my next Halloween marathon list because I know they were super inspirational for people like Tim Burton and all that kind of stuff as well. So that's cool. And then just to quickly answer this, Jachi, it's not will we ever have Kyle Kalinske on the show? He knows he's welcome. We've made that abundantly clear. And also, he's literally on our live stream. He got a question that was like, would you ever go on H3 or the Vanguard? Which I never thought we would be mentioned with Ethan Klein in the same breath. I actually did not even know who H3 was at that time. But now then I learned and I was like, holy shit. Okay, word. But he was like, yeah, right now I'm only going on my friend Joe Rogan's podcast. And I was like, okay, your good friend Joe Rogan. All right. I used to make that joke in like tongue in cheek about Glenn Greenwald when I was super stoked that he came on our show, so I can't drag him too hard. But anyway, yeah. But then we got a little bit more, Kyle ended up in the hot seat on the Vanguard for one episode, and I don't think you'll ever see him come here for an interview after that.
Yeah, when Zach said earlier that we've pissed off everyone in this space, Kyle's definitely, I think, among those people. A lot of people just don't. I think Kyle's like, I don't know if it's maybe because he's a little bit older than us or something, but I think he kind of has this like idea where it's like he doesn't really like criticizing other people on his show. That's not his style. So when he gets criticized by someone else, even if it's just like, totally polite. He kind of takes offense to it and like takes it personally. I feel like we saw that definitely during like the TYT and Jimmy thing. Like Jimmy Dore like liked to tweet about him and he got all pissed off and shit. So he definitely has a little bit of thin skin in that regard. So he probably didn't like being challenged by us. But that being said, of course he'd always be welcome on our show. Pretty much anyone would be welcome on our show to have a conversation. I can't really think of any commentators in the leftist space, independent media space, that we wouldn't happily have a conversation with. And of course, that includes Kyle Kalinske. Unfortunately, he just does not really seem to do a lot of other shows in general. He has his Crystal Kyle show, but I don't even remember the last time I saw him on someone else's show. I mean, maybe Katie Halper back when they did Crystal Kyle and Friends. I think he, did an episode with Katie Halper. But that's like the last time I can think of he actually went on someone else's show. He just doesn't do it a lot, which is fair. I mean, he's an introverted guy, I know, and I am too. I don't necessarily love, doing a shit ton of panels and interviews and all that stuff too. When I'm not on the Vanguard, I like to be, doing my own thing and pursuing my own hobbies outside of this. And I think he's the same way. So I respect that. And he can obviously do whatever the hell he wants. But of course, we would always be interested in chatting. I think that would be a really interesting and constructive conversations, getting into some of the areas where we disagree. And of course, the areas where we agree as well. But, I wouldn't hold your breath, Jachi. I would not hold your breath for that to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, in the early stages of the Vanguard, Gavin and I interviewed so many people, guys. I don't even know if you guys know this about the Vanguard, but we interviewed I felt like fucking 100 candidates, bro. Like we interviewed, and I don't even know if it was 100, but it was a fuck ton of candidates that we talked to. We interviewed everybody, it seemed like, on the left, whatever. So if you're curious to hear some old interviews, go back, please. Feel free to check them out. But we've sort of developed a reputation about what it's like to talk to the Vanguard when you're running for office, and we don't mince words and we don't give a shit. And we're going to ask you why the fuck we should tell our audience to give you money when every single other person that we've ever talked to lied to them and threw them under the fucking bus, and what makes you so different. And of course, they don't have any answers for that. So they don't want to get asked those questions by people like us. But if you're curious in the background, like, why aren't more people coming on here to get interviewed? It's well, a lot of people don't like to sit in the hot seat, brother. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And yeah, thanks everyone for the chats too. Really appreciate that. And yeah, you're right, Rodrigo. He did go on Vosh's show. That was the last time he appeared on someone else's show. It seems like, yeah, unless you're Joe Rogan or Vosh, you don't really have any access to Kyle Kalinske, well, except for Crystal Ball, obviously. But it is what it is. Obviously, we're not a huge platform, probably not worth his time. I understand. And he probably doesn't want to be asked tough, uncomfortable questions by us anyway. So it is what it is. That being said, let's get back to a few more of these patron questions. I think we have another one from Hammock Lady. Thank you so much, Hammock Lady, again. This one's for you, Zach. She would love to see you interview your dad. It would be so interesting to see them have an open and honest conversation about their divergent ideologies and, of course, their similarities, of which I'm sure there are many. You can take that away, Zach. What do you think about that?
Look, guys, my dad's a fucking character. Okay, it would be hilarious if we had him on the show. I'll be honest with all of you, but it will never happen. That would just be so strange for my dad. His politics are so undefinable. I'll try and he's a really he understands the world is fucked, it's owned by rich people, we're all gonna get screwed by climate change, all that kind of stuff. But he'll just say shit to me like, Zach, we're a warring nation. This is how it's always been. This is what we do. This is how we leave our mark on this fucked up world. He's just so Gen X defeatist. He never thought there was a prayer of changing the world anyway. And so now, of course, he's not when bad shit happens, he's like, yeah, this is what the fuck happens. It's what goes around comes around. You'll be all right. Whatever. So if you're curious about, how I get where I inherit my doomerism, that's that. But no, I don't know if we'll ever have my dad on for an interview. But thank you for that suggestion, Hammock Lady. That did give me a good chuckle when I read that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And just because some people are asking about it, I have to say I totally agree. This was cringy as fuck. Just being honest. Cringy as fuck. Cringy as fuck. But yeah, let's move on to one. I just can't lie, guys. I can't sit here and not address this, but it's true. Yeah, let's move on to the next patron question. Solgato Blagopago. I love your name. The world definitely needs some cinema about other economic issues than capitalism that aren't all rubbernecky or unfamiliar culturally, just normal life. Yeah, so basically you're saying more movies about just normal working class people, I'm gonna guess. That are kind of, is that what you're interpreting this question as, Zach?
I think he's talking about movies that take place under worlds with different economic systems. So I'm thinking like a Brazil where everything is like anarchist, or like a Brazil where it's authoritarian and communist. I don't fucking know, but that's the way I was kind of taking it, like dystopian cinema with new economic systems, or actually the opposite of that, which would be like presenting a normal reality with a completely different economic system. This isn't a particularly good movie, but I remember there was the Justin Timberlake movie where everybody had the currency of time. That's like the closest thing I can think of to like a mainstream blockbuster. Obviously, like Parasite was about the current economic system that we have, capitalism and its failures, and it's an amazing movie. And if you haven't seen it, it is not just Oscar hype. It is actually one of the few masterpieces to ever win Best Picture, in my opinion. A fucking phenomenal film that I cannot sing its praises of, even though I do think that many rich people missed the point when they fucking saw it and just wanted to break their spines patting themselves on the fucking back. But anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. Parasite is a masterpiece. That cannot be said enough. It's not necessarily a hot take or anything, but it is true. But yeah, Salgato, I agree that we do need more, cinema that's about other economic systems and just about normal working class people, that kind of thing. I love movies like, for example, Sean Baker is a great filmmaker who makes a lot of movies that are just about normal working class people, sex workers, stuff like that. Jeff Nichols is another filmmaker who I love, who makes films about working class people, middle America, stuff like that. So yeah, I love that kind of movies, and I agree we need more of them. And thank you so much for the question. Uh, Thank you, John McKinney, 499. Apparently, if you criticize Fauci, you're criticizing science. Sounds like identity politics to me. Yeah, obviously, I don't agree with that. There's a lot of very valid reasons to criticize Dr. Fauci. I think he's demonstrated multiple times throughout his tenure that he is not someone that necessarily should be trusted. I mean, going back to the whole mask debacle where he said, we don't need to be wearing masks. It's fine. They're not going to do anything anyway. And then later admitted that he was lying. It's like, okay, well, there goes your credibility. I don't really know how you could possibly justify or excuse that. So yeah, I definitely don't agree.
We're not funding gain of function research.
Yeah, and then there's the whole gain of function thing. So yeah, definitely not a big Fauci fan here. That's definitely that's definitely true.
100%. Don't support. I don't. Yeah, don't. Fauci's full of shit. Obviously, he has been. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is that's why people don't know who to trust, because they cannot fucking. There's no person of authority that they can turn to on this matter, unfortunately. But anyway, no. That's not the point that Gavin was making when he said that it was cringy as fuck that Jimmy interviewed our FKJ or whatever the fuck that guy's name is.
Yeah, no, and generally, I mean, regardless of what Dr. Fauci says, I personally just try to look to the scientific community as large. What is the consensus among the scientific and medical community? Much like with climate change, the majority of doctors are on the same page, just like how the majority of climate scientists are on the same page as far as climate change. Generally, we're not going to have like 97% agreement within the scientific community. If it's not, if it's not true, you know what I'm saying? So I tend to just, look to the experts and all that shit. I'm certainly not a scientist myself, nor a doctor. So that would be my answer to that. But thank you so much for the question. And yeah, let's move on to the next patron question. One more we have. Thank you, Ron. What time does it start? Oh yeah, this is I already answered that. What is the optimal way to support you guys without supporting big tech? I.e., 30% of the super chat money goes to YouTube. Pay y'all takes their cut. Monthly payments mean more service charges, etc. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much for the support, Ron, and for the question. Really appreciate you asking this, and just the fact that you're interested in supporting us at all means a lot. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if by pay y'all you're talking about PayPal. I'm assuming you are, because I would say that PayPal would be the best way to support us if you don't want to see them take much of a cut. I guess PayPal does take a small percentage, but when you compare it with the like 30% of the super chat that goes to YouTube, it's significantly less than that. So I would say PayPal, although like you're saying, it does take a bit of a cut too. But we do have a PayPal link in the description of all of our videos if you guys would like to donate that way. Again, without having some of that money go to YouTube and Google, that's a good way to do it. Although, yeah, like you said, even PayPal takes a small percentage. Besides that, I mean, I guess you could send us some cash in the mail, but I don't really know what else, another good way to do it. Do you have anything to say on that, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, look, PayPal service charges, I will say, are relatively negligible because we don't do the, when we are dealing with Vanguard finances and shit, you do the like bank to bank transfer. So, I mean, if you're curious about that, it's like 3% as opposed to 30. But that being said, whatever ways anybody feels comfortable, whatever whatever way you feel is, the best way for you to support the Vanguard. If you're interested in supporting us at all, Gavin said, we both feel very grateful. We're very humbled by the support that we've been shown doing this and all that jazz. So, yeah, definitely whatever is your favorite. We do not accept payment in NFT or Bitcoin or anything like that. In fact, Gavin and I have never, I don't think we've ever actually touched any of the Rockfin tokens that we've ever earned because we just have no fucking idea how. Yeah, that's kind of where our brains are at as far as the cryptocurrency game is concerned. But we're just two regular dudes with the YouTube show, so that is what it is.
Just two regular bros. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Really appreciate all the questions and donations. Obviously, if anyone wants to send something in the last second here, we're gonna be signing off here in the next few minutes. So yeah, just really appreciate the conversation as always. Love seeing what you guys are talking about in the chat. And really appreciate all the donations and questions, like I said. But yeah, we are technically on Rockfin too. I guess you can donate that way if you really, really prefer to do that. Eventually we'll
like
figure
giving
out.
us a savings bond in 10 fucking years. Gavin and I'll figure out how to use it.
Yeah, we have a decent amount of Ray tokens built up that we have not translated into USD. Probably should do that at some point, but also part of me just wants to let it sit there and potentially accumulate if Rockfin were to get bigger or whatever. So who knows? Anyway, I guess we can shout out our patron community before we jump off for today, unless you had anything else to say, Zach.
Yeah, I also wanted to let everybody know that after this, we'll be going live on Call-In. So just to get our Call-In show started, guys, if you want to see the Vanguard on the top of the charts at Call-In, you'll never see us on the top of the charts. But if you want to see us closer to the top of the charts on Call-In, download the Call-In app. It's actually a really cool app. It's easy to use. You can talk shit with us. You can hear our voices. We can hear your voices. We can have some community and all that shit. We're going to be talking about the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict, how she's guilty, about how she'll probably be a sacrificial lamb. There's not going to be much punishment for Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, as my father likes to call him. We've been talking about my dad on this stream. And Slick Willie slicked away one more time. But anyway, yeah, that's what we'll be talking about on call in. Anybody that wants to call in, you can also get a Q&A question. I don't care what the fuck it's about. You can ask us. We'll answer it. So if we didn't get to your question during the Q&A stream right now, download the call-in app, get in the call-in queue. We'll take it from there for you guys. But yeah, really appreciate everybody tuning in. Really appreciate everybody that supported via Super Chat, supported via hitting the like button, that subscribe button on Patreon. Yeah, makes our show go round. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. And yeah, that's Callin. If you're not familiar, the app Call-In. We are doing weekly podcasts on there now. A lot of fun. Get to engage with you guys a little bit more. And yeah, we're about to go live on there right after this stream is over. So if you have nothing else better to do and want to keep hearing us talk, then might as well download that app and check it out. If you have an iPhone, it's rolling out the Android version currently. So currently only for iPhones, unfortunately. But Jenny, it's not any money at all, by the way. It's totally free. You can download the app for free. You can listen to the show for free. No money involved. So no worries about that. You don't have to pay to, ask us a question or whatever. It'll all just be an open dialogue. But yeah, really appreciate everyone tuning in. As always, we do like to end our shows with a shout out to the patron community. Thank you so much to everyone supporting the show on patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. Really does help keep us alive. Really helps keep the show going. Et cetera, et cetera. And we do, for those reasons, like to shout out our patrons at the beginning and end of every live stream. That link is in the description, as well as that PayPal link, which I mentioned earlier. So if you're really itching to support the show, then that's how you can do it. It genuinely helps. And speaking of supporting the show, just a huge shout out and thank you to everyone that super chatted today. It really means a lot, and all that money will go to good use, making the channel better, I promise. And it looks like we did get one more super chat. So Das Boats Fleisch, thank you so much for the $4.99. Really appreciate that, man. How's the relationship with the useful idiots? Will there be a video answer sprees in the future? A relationship with useful idiots? I mean, pretty good as far as I'm concerned. I know we're planning on having Katie Halper back on sometime in the future. She's putting out a new documentary film that I'm really excited about. So hopefully we're going to be chatting with her about that. As far as Matt Taibbi, he seems like he's a pretty hard to reach guy. He's very busy, of course, with the Substack, and he's a pretty high profile journalist. So we haven't had him on the show yet, but of course we'd love to chat with him. But as far as I know, our relationship with him is good. I hope they still enjoy our show.
Yeah, look, I mean, we have much of a relationship with Useful Idiots. We've made a couple of funny videos on the internet about each other, so I don't know what the fuck is going on with them. But yeah, Matt, obviously one of our most influential journalists on me and Gavin as well. So of course he always would be welcome on here. We just don't fucking hassle people that I'm like, oh, they're really fucking busy. It's the holiday time. Like, do you want to come on my podcast? That's way smaller than your own podcast. Like, that's not necessarily a great pitch to make to somebody that you admire, which is why we're always super grateful when super high profile people say that they're interested in coming on our show, that kind of thing. And I also want to ask Matt why he took a fat shit on Howard Zinn in his Substack the other day. So yeah, I want to ask him about that. I'm all pro free gift stores. I mean, bro, what the hell? I love Howard Zinn, so I'll go to the Mats for that one. But anyway, yeah, love the Useful Idiots. They're both really smart people that we like a lot and would love to have them on the show if that was ever something that compelled them for whatever reason. But anyway, as Gavin said, we're getting the fuck out of here. Thank you, Das Bosch Fleisch. And thank you for everybody that listened today. And please continue chatting with us on Call-In or we will be sad.
Yeah, and thank you, Ginny. I guess Ginny wasn't referring to Colin. She just meant how to support us. No problem. Obviously, if you don't have the financial means to support us, we're going to be fine. All you need to do is watch the show, leave a like, hit that subscribe button. That's also a great way to support the show if you don't have money burning a hole in your pocket necessarily. So thank you, Ginny, and thank you to everyone that chatted today. Everyone super chatted, etc., etc. We'll be back soon. And again, if you want to continue listening to us yammer, check out that Call-In show. But peace out, guys.